You're listening to the Jam Price Show, all about movies. And today, my guest is award winning filmmaker Dean Alioto. And we're going to be talking about his brand new documentary entitled The Alien Perspective. Welcome to the show, Dean.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here, Judy.
It's great to have you here. Here we go. This is very interesting perspective, calling it the alien perspective. You have become the expert in aliens and UFOs, it seems like, the expert documentary filmmaker.
It I can assure you it wasn't my intention. It was I had made this film called the McPherson tape, which is reported to be the first found footage film ever, and right out of film school. And that film, someone edited off the credits and passed it around the UFO community as being the real thing. So I actually ended up going on national TV to debunk my own film. I may be the only filmmaker to do this. And what happened then was 5 years later, it became this big conspiracy theory that I tried to quash and squash it as much as I could. And then at some point, it just entered the lexicon of the genre, not just horror and sci-fi movies, but also the UFO community. And so for the 25th anniversary, the International UFO Congress Convention reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you like to come here and talk to our community?" And at first, I was nervous because I didn't know, how they would feel about me being associated with this film, even though I'm firmly on record with debunking it. I take my work very serious. I don't take myself serious. So I thought if they're going to be fun and have fun with it, then let's do it. And so I went and I spoke for 75 minutes and it was like 1,000 people and it was great. They're the loveliest people in the world. And all through my life, I've always kind of been not an armchair expert, but more of like an armchair prosumer with regards to the phenomenon. It's fed my sci-fi work, but going to the Congress, the convention, I I met a lot of interesting people that were professors at Montana Tech and at Harvard and all these other places, and realized that this isn't, just people who are have a kind of a side hobby or fan of this. These are people doing serious research. And so because I'd done documentaries for A&E, Bravo, and Discovery, I thought if I could do a really nice premium documentary in this space, I might be able to present it in a way that will be more receptive to the general public, not just the UFO community. And that set me off on this 7-year journey.
Absolutely amazing, the journey you're on. And then you change and you decide to, this is very different for you, right? The alien perspective. And so let's talk a little bit, tell the audience what the alien perspective is all about. So when we're talking about it, they'll have a good idea of what we're discussing.
Sure, Jan. So when you look at all the documentaries that are out there, and there's a lot of great documentaries in the space, they're all told from one perspective, and that's the human's perspective. And so I've also worked on crime shows, and the thing that I'm always interested in is looking at it from the perpetrator's perspective, or maybe sometimes the victim's perspective. And that becomes a whole other area that you glean so much more insight than you would just, basically looking at yourself in the mirror. So with that thesis in mind, I went and started doing these interviews, and I started with a couple. I thought I would do 15 interviews and I'd be done in like 9 months with the film. End of story. This is 2018. And the challenge with this genre, with this space, is that as soon as you talk to someone, like we talked to NASA, and the NASA leads you to SETI, and then SETI leads you somewhere else. And then you keep going, and these people say, "Oh, well, if you're interested in this question, I might not be able to answer it, but you need to go to this person." And so it just became this, kind of virus thing that spread to 66 interviews and 4 countries.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So you, this is a two-part documentary. I found that also very interesting. So
Yeah.
why did you decide to make it two parts?
I made it 2 parts because the first one is kind of an introductory into this. we have fantastic professors and experts. We've got Michio Kaku, who's pretty much hosting the first part and giving his insights into looking at it again as a hypothetical from the alien's point of view. And then we've also got Nick Bostrom, who created the simulation reality hypothesis out of Oxford, which is that we're living in a simulated reality. And so it felt like this got people up to a certain point, and there's plenty mic drops in there that people who are experts in this field have never seen before. So it's not like this is just for the beginners. It's for, as the tagline is, it's for believers, skeptics, and everyone else. But the second one goes next level, and you kind of need that first primer to happen. In addition, there's a lot of animation that goes into these things. I wanted to do 2D animation, hand-drawn animation, which just hasn't been seen also in this space. And I always love, there's a movie, Oscar-winning film called Searching for Sugarman, a documentary. I tracked down that animator, and he came on board and did the first episode, and we're still doing animation on the second episode. So that is the timing that we're doing as well. But the second one will probably come out in May. But there's enough meaty stuff here to digest. So you're going to need to until part two comes out.
Exactly. And you have created this like a mystery, just like you said, you like mysteries, and you've created this as a mystery. I love your opening scene. It's, like deep, dark CIA,
Cloak and
type
Dagger.
thing. Yeah, that people are like when you first start to watch it, you go, "Oh, this is going to be very interesting and fascinating. Let's see where this goes."
Yeah, well, again, that wasn't the initial inception idea. We didn't know that someone was going to come across us, someone very credible, who's a professor at Albany, University of Albany, who got his hands on some material that may or may not be extraterrestrial based. And so that's kind of the subplot that set us off. And the big payoff is when it gets analyzed and we get all those findings, which we're going to be presenting in the alien perspective part two.
So, why did you take the opposite point of view on this particular documentary?
Because I think that if a lot of people talk about why would they visit us. Some might say we're like ants to them if they're so advanced that they can fly here from wherever they came. Um, and that's like saying, oh, well, there should no longer be entomologists that study ants here. So that analogy doesn't really work. Um, I think that if they're coming here because they're curious. If they wanted to do destruction, then, and we look into all the scenarios of why they would come here. Again, look at it from their perspective. And so I think that also holds a mirror, another kind of mirror, up to us by looking at it from their perspective to say, this is how they're seeing us. And we see what's great about us and we see things that are not so great. And so, like with what's been going on with the world and climate change and everything, it's like if you're not going to listen to the experts, maybe you'll listen to what they have to say. And people that have interacted with these beings, and you'll see in part of this and in part two, they talk about that there's a concern that we are kind of affecting in not a great way our planet. And so you don't have to be an alien to look and see that, right? And so it's really curious what they would think of us. I always look at their version of us as kind of like looking at a TV show, right? You've got situation comedies, you've got these dramas, and they can be dramas about humanity, great. And then you have great violent shows, action shows. And so that's kind of what humanity is. And so on the scale of things, if you look at it from their perspective, again, what you're doing is you're looking from the future back at us because we are so new on this planet. There were a few billion years before we showed up. And so if there is another intelligent species, as Dr. Michio Kaku says, there won't be just 100 years or 1,000 years. They could be millions or billions of years. So that advancement, if we can make it there, what would we do? And how would we look at a lesser technologized civilization?
And I think it's hubris for us to think that there isn't anybody out there besides us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of like Galileo, no, 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 no. The sun revolves around us, not the other way around, and people were thrown in jail, etc. But it is, as a kid, I used to always look out my window at the stars. And, when you come from a divorced family, sometimes it's tough and you dream of other things and a better life. But I would look out in the stars and I would think maybe there's someone from another planet who's going through something similar, just like me. Um, I'm filled with wonder of what that could be, and as a filmmaker, I will make movies like, and be inspired by like Spielberg and other filmmakers. But, working in documentaries, you get to talk to people who can throw down and say, here's a little teaser of what's to come, what we know technology wise, what we're going to be capable of, and what these beings or whatever they are, the intelligence that are visiting us, what they have.
Exactly. I had my very, very, very best friend who told me that she was abducted by aliens, and she
Mhm.
lived in Tucson, Arizona. And
Okay.
she described it all, and I mean, there was no doubt in her mind that this had happened to her. And I guess that I can't remember, she's passed away just a while ago, actually, but that they put something in her, like
An implant.
yes, an implant. And she was seeking out during her lifetime many other people who had the same experience. And there are, as you know already, there are a lot of groups out there and a lot of people who feel that they believe 100% that this did happen to them.
Yeah, it's a bit of a rabbit hole. I mean, I start at NASA and go from NASA to taking this to ultimately to experiencers and people that have had interactions with beings. Um, that was a whole other rabbit hole. And there was a professor, John Mack, who I'm working on a documentary about him. He was a Harvard professor. He was the darling of Harvard, head of the psychiatric department, won a Pulitzer Prize. And he heard about people who claimed to be abducted. And in his mind, he's like, well, I'm going to solve this. I'm going to crack this, and we'll call it the John Mack, syndrome or something. Instead, he discovered that these people all had one component that threw off anyone's discrediting of these. They call themselves experiencers, and that is that they suffer from PTSD. So the thing with PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, is you can't fake that. It is literally trackable in the brain, quantifiable. And so he would comb through these people's past to say, okay, well, let's find when that started. And he wasn't able to find anything in their childhood or anything before the events happened where they started to experience these interactions with these beings. And so that threw him for a loop. And he published a book. He was on Oprah. But he was, this is the 90s, and Harvard went after him. They tried to fire him. They tried to revoke his license. It was pretty scary, and so that again, that witch hunt, didn't happen too long ago. So my feeling with people who are experiencers, whether they're having this experience emotionally, mentally, or physically, I use this description all the time. If I were to say to you, um, oh, you saw a UFO. What color was it? Did they have antennas, this and that? Which is what the media does. But if I say to you, oh, you were abducted, was it a white van? Was it a black van? Was it duct tape? Was it rope? I mean, talk about you'd have your butt canceled. But that type of empathy for someone who's been through something, whether it's emotional or physical, is needed in this. So anyone who tells me those stories, and I've talked to people who are Homeland Security people in the military. These are highly credible people that have had these experiences. So, but it's kind of, we've been focusing on the congressional hearings and stuff with UFOs, right? And they're doing everything but bringing out artifacts, a tailpipe of a UFO. But the next level is the experiencers who are having these pretty profound life-changing, events in their life.
Do you think that Congress will call these people?
They want to go. I know plenty of them that want to go before Congress. They want to have a seat at the table, and they should. But it's really dodgy because what happens is you're basically going to be telling the public, yes, we're aware of this, but there's nothing we can do to stop it. And a lot of these experiencers say that they don't want to, that as terrifying as it is, that they're also feeling like they're communing with a higher intelligence and what they get from it. I mean, a lot of people say that some of the side effects they get, like one of them, she was in her 20s and she went and had herself tested because she felt like I'm understanding things that I don't normally understand. And this is a salt of the earth person growing up in the Midwest. She now works or I think she retired from working GMC on an assembly line. And she went just for the heck of it and she took a Mensa test, an intelligence test, and she scored in the top 1%. So it's a give and take, thing. And again, with the Alien Perspective documentary, my goal is to look at that and go, why would they interact with us? What would be the main catalyst for that? And also with the animation, we actually do. So like with Dave Fravor and the Tic Tac and being a jet pilot and seeing this craft go before him, I can actually put you in the cockpit watching as across your windshield you see this thing, and then looking back at Fravor as we come up upon his jet fighter. So it's all interrelated. I would have to say, and again, 7 years, and I know much more than I did, but I also know a lot more that I don't know, if that makes sense.
So there might be a part three.
Oh gosh. Uh, Probably, I hope not. The John Mack will cover a lot of things, a lot of spillover into that. I do have another documentary is that I've been working on the side called The Experiencers. So it's kind of the whole genre kind of pulls you in. But after that, I'm going back to making probably indie films and kind of cleanse my palate before I come back. But yeah.
Very good idea, I would suppose. In this, you have, okay, let's go back. With the new information that's come out recently, when declassifying the documents in regards to UFOs, what is your thoughts about that? Because more and more people, and you have them in your film, have come out who are, as you say, doctors, PhDs, who are coming out and saying, and people in the military, that they believe unequivocally that they did see and came in contact with a UFO. What are your thoughts about that? Why do you think that's coming out now? Do you think there was just because there's been such clamoring over the years to want from the public really wanting to find out more, and the government was just pushing it down and didn't want us to know about it. And now all of a sudden it is coming out. Why do you think that's happening now?
Next to the $1 trillion question, which is why they're coming here, is the $1 million question, which is why now? And I've looked at all of the, reverse engineered the timeline going back to 2017 when the Navy came out and said, it isn't us. It's not our adversaries. So we don't know what it is. NHI, non-human intelligence. When they did that, they set all of this into motion. And when Lou Elizondo, who was working with these programs, that the government had these UFO programs that were not well known, they were kind of hidden. Um, when he came out and was kind of the whistleblower, if you will, and got that Tic Tac footage out and everything, that was tangible evidence. So the fact that it was coming from the military was completely different than every other, average Joe who would come up and say, here, I saw this above my Manhattan apartment, or I saw this, in my field. That changed everything. There was a certain credibility. And so, as Michio Kaku says in the documentary, the burden of proof is no longer on the UFO community. It's now on the military and the government to say that it isn't and prove that it isn't. And so it's a big sea change, huge.
It is.
Why is it happening now on the scale of mankind? I think that I mean, the polls all state that most of Americans believe that we are being visited. and a huge chunk of them believe that there's UFO cover up by the government. So I think anything that comes out just looks ridiculous. Someone coming out like the old Project Blue Book and saying, "Oh, it's a balloon, it's this and that." It doesn't hold water anymore, and so I think people can handle it. And maybe that's why it's happening now is that people can handle it. They're more receptive.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think because we've been hearing about it so much and for so many years and for so long, I think people uh, believe, hey, this can't be. There's got to be something to it. If we keep hearing about it over and over again from different perspectives, again, alien perspective.
Yeah.
What was the most difficult part? You said this took 7 years to make this movie. What was the most difficult part for you, Dean, in making this
Oh,
film?
that's a good question. There's a few different ones. One was going to France, and not that going to France is difficult at
To
all.
say, really, that's not too bad.
No, but it was interviewing a French astronaut, and I wanted him to talk in his language, and uh, and so because this is a universal story, but I don't speak French. I should have brought my girlfriend Allie because she's fluent in it. But so recording him and getting his story and his perspective on it. But I would say the toughest part was, boy, it was an interview in the documentary with Jim Peniston, who was a security sergeant official at Bentwaters, which is a military base that's in the UK, Royal Air Force Base. That he's an American and he was stationed there. And there's a forest next to it called Rendlesham Forest, and that's where this craft was not only seen but landed. And as far as I know, he's the first person to go up and touch a UFO. And he went up and did that. And the way that I work with people, like when I'm doing crime shows, is I take them to the scene of the crime and I try to make this something that they can recall, like their sense memory can recall. And I said to him, I go, okay, Jim, I want you to take me back. It's December. It's the day after Christmas, 1980. It's probably cold as hell, right? And he goes, oh, yeah. And I said, you got dew on the trees and on the branches. What does that feel like? And he just like kind of went into a fugue state, was coherent, totally coherent. But he said, I just saw this change come over him and he says, I'm there. And I go, okay, so let's talk about it. He goes, no, I am there. And I go, what do you mean you're there? And he says, I see the forest all around me. I have no other memory in my life that I can recall so visceral. He says, I can see the tree. I can see the different branches. And I went, great, let's go with that. And at some point it was so emotional for him, we had to stop. And that was tough because, this is a hardened vet, having to divulge that. And I wanted to be very respectful. So it was kind of wanting to get in and get these answers, but also be respectful and don't, root around in someone's psyche, without, being respectful. That was tough seeing him go through that. But it yielded one of the most powerful, scenes in the movie, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that, definitely. Dean, where can people see the alien perspective?
You can see the alien perspective on Amazon right now, and you can also get it on Apple TV.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I wish you much success with the alien perspective. Looking forward to part two.
Thank you, Jan. I appreciate it.
Thank you. For all my loyal listeners, if you would like to monetarily support the Jan Price Show All About Movies, you can now do that with a tax-free donation. Just go to creativevisions.org. That's creativevisions.org. Go to the podcast section and find me there and click on the Jan Price Show All About Movies, where your donation not only helps support the Jan Price Show, it also helps support independent and documentary filmmakers. So everyone will gain from this, and you'll gain a tax-free donation. So thank you in advance for your support. And thank you, Dean, for being on the show today.
Thank you.